The Marauders. Before the world knew them as pranksters, rebels, and tragic heroes, the Marauders were just four boys who happened to find each other on the Scarlet steam engine bound for Hogwarts. James Potter, bold and talented, was born into a wealthy wizarding family that had given him both confidence and a mischievous streak. Sirius Black, the black sheep of the pure-blood Black family, carried rebellion in his blood and found in James the brother he always wished for. Then there was Peter Pettigrew, smaller, nervous, always eager to attach himself to stronger personalities. And finally, Remus Lupin, quiet, thoughtful, and carrying a burden far darker than the others realized at first. Together they became the Marauders, Prongs, Padfoot, Wormtail, and Moony. But what bound them wasn't simply mischief or pranks. Their friendship was forged through secrets, loyalty, and sacrifices that most students at Hogwarts could never imagine. Remus Lupin's childhood. Long before he ever stepped foot into the Hogwarts castle, Remus Lupin's life was already scarred by tragedy. As a young child, he was attacked by Fenrir Greyback, a werewolf notorious for his cruelty and his obsession with turning children into monsters like himself. The attack left Remus cursed with lycanthropy, meaning that every full moon he would transform into a werewolf. His parents tried desperately to shield him, but in the wizarding world, a werewolf child carried a heavy stigma. Few thought he could ever live a normal life, let alone attend Hogwarts. It was only Albus Dumbledore, the newly appointed headmaster, who chose compassion over fear. He not only allowed Remus to attend Hogwarts, but also had a plan to keep him and others safe. Hidden beneath the Whomping Willow lay a secret tunnel that led to the Shrieking Shack, a building on the edge of Hogsmeade. Each full moon, Remus would be escorted there, where he could transform away from other students. It should have been a lonely existence. Each month meant isolation, pain, and the reminder that he was different. But fate had other plans. When he met James, Sirius, and Peter in Gryffindor, he discovered something rare. Friends who saw him not as a monster, but as one of their own. Friendship and loyalty. Hogwarts is a place where friendships can feel larger than life. And for these four boys, that bond became legendary. James and Sirius quickly became inseparable. James with his charm, and Sirius with his reckless bravado. Peter looked up to them with awe, clinging to their strength, while Remus balanced the group with quiet intelligence. But their friendship was tested early on when James and Sirius noticed that Remus disappeared every month without explanation. While others whispered rumours, they pieced the truth together. Remus was a werewolf. For most, this revelation would have been the end of a friendship. Fear, disgust, or mistrust would have driven them apart. But James, Sirius, and even Peter refused to abandon him. Instead, they chose loyalty. This wasn't empty sympathy. They decided to act. The three of them resolved to undertake one of the most dangerous and complicated magical transformations, becoming animagi. If they could turn into animals, they could accompany Remus during his transformations, protecting him and perhaps making those cursed nights less lonely. It was a promise of friendship unlike any other, and one that defined the Marauders for the rest of their lives. From this point on, the Marauders weren't just four students at Hogwarts. They were brothers, bound by secrecy and trust, ready to bend every rule in the castle if it meant standing by each other. Animagi transformation. For most Hogwarts students, breaking curfew or sneaking into the kitchens was about as daring as it got, but for James, Sirius, and Peter, the stakes were much higher. They weren't content to simply offer Remus moral support. They wanted to be with him when he transformed to make those nights less terrifying. The problem was, how do you spend time with a werewolf and survive to tell the tale? Their answer was as reckless as it was brilliant. Become animagi. By turning into animals, they would be less threatened by Remus's wolf form and could even help keep him under control. But this wasn't just a schoolyard trick. The animagus transformation was advanced, dangerous magic, far beyond the level of ordinary students. It required precision, discipline, and nerve, qualities that, in their own way, each of the three young wizards possessed. Years of secret study followed. The boys stole books from the restricted section, practiced in hidden corners of the castle, and pushed themselves to the limit. The risk was real. A failed attempt could leave them trapped halfway between human and animal forever. Yet by their fifth year, they succeeded. James became a majestic stag, Sirius transformed into a great black dog, and Peter, perhaps unexpectedly, took the form of a rat. With this power, they joined Remus on his monthly journeys to the Shrieking Shack. For the first time, Remus wasn't alone. Creation of the Marauders Map. It wasn't long before their animagus abilities opened up the castle in ways other students never even dreamed of. As animals, they could slip past prefects, sneak into forbidden areas, and wander the castle grounds without being caught. Curiosity and mischief drove them further. They explored every hidden passage, every tunnel leading out of Hogwarts, and every trick the ancient castle had to offer. But exploration was only half the fun. They wanted to record it, to leave their mark on Hogwarts. The result was the Marauders Map. It wasn't just a drawing of the castle, it was living magic. With a single tap, the map revealed every corridor, staircase, and hidden door, complete with the names and movements of everyone inside. It was audacious, brilliant, and unlike anything ever seen before. They signed it with pride: Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. To them, it was more than a map. It was a symbol of their friendship, their genius, and their defiance of authority. For years, it gave them an edge in their mischief, until it was eventually confiscated by Argus Filch, who had no idea of the treasure he'd locked away in his office. The map would disappear for a while, only to resurface years later when Harry Potter would stumble upon it, unknowingly reconnecting with his father's legacy. Rivalry with Severus Snape. But life at Hogwarts wasn't all adventure and laughter. For every prank and late-night escapade, there was a darker side to the Marauders' story, one centered on their rivalry with Severus Snape. From the moment James and Sirius crossed paths with him, sparks flew. Snape, intense and deeply fascinated by the dark arts, despised their arrogance, and James in turn couldn't resist mocking and humiliating him at every turn. What began as schoolyard hostility grew into outright bullying. James and Sirius would hex Snape for sport, often with Peter watching eagerly and Remus looking on uncomfortably, torn between disapproval and silence. To Snape, it was torment. To the Marauders, it was just another prank. But beneath the laughter, this feud carried lasting consequences. The rivalry reached its most dangerous point when Snape grew suspicious of Remus's monthly disappearances. Eager to expose him, Snape followed Sirius's careless hint one night and came dangerously close to discovering the truth. He would have walked straight into the path of a transformed werewolf if James hadn't intervened, dragging him back at the last moment. James saved his life, but Snape never saw it as an act of mercy. To him, it was further proof of their arrogance, that they played with his life for their amusement. That incident created a wound that never fully healed. Snape's hatred for James only deepened, a bitterness that would last well beyond their school years. And for the Marauders, it was a reminder that their recklessness had limits, and that their secrets were far more dangerous than they let on. The Order of the Phoenix. When the Marauders graduated from Hogwarts, the world outside the castle walls was changing rapidly. Lord Voldemort's power was growing, and Wizarding Britain was slipping into fear and violence. For James, Sirius, Remus, and even Peter, the path forward was clear. They would fight. Dumbledore had formed the Order of the Phoenix, a secret resistance group dedicated to opposing Voldemort and his Death Eaters. The Marauders joined without hesitation. James and Sirius, brash and fearless, threw themselves into dangerous missions, often working together to strike against Voldemort's followers. Remus, though he faced prejudice due to his werewolf condition, became a trusted and reliable member of the Order, his quiet wisdom balancing the group's recklessness. Even Peter, who was rarely the strongest among them, played his part, though behind his loyalty, cracks were beginning to show. This was also the time when James's life changed forever. He had fallen in love with Lily Evans, the brilliant Gryffindor who once despised his arrogance but slowly saw his courage and heart beneath the bravado. The two married and soon welcomed a son, Harry James Potter. Sirius, refusing his own dark family and bloodline, became Harry's godfather, taking his role with pride. Betrayal by Peter Pettigrew. While James, Sirius, and Remus were willing to risk everything in the fight against Voldemort, Peter Pettigrew was not. Small, nervous, and easily intimidated, Peter felt overshadowed by his brilliant friends. In Voldemort, he saw not only fear, but also protection, a master too powerful to defy. Slowly, Wormtail shifted from loyal marauder to secret Death Eater, passing information from within the Order to Voldemort's forces. By 1981, James and Lily Potter had become primary targets for Voldemort. To protect them, Dumbledore suggested the Fidelius Charm, an enchantment that hid them away in Godric's Hollow. The key to this spell was the Secret Keeper, the one person who could reveal their location. Everyone assumed Sirius would be chosen, but in a move meant to deceive Voldemort, Sirius convinced James to make Peter the secret keeper instead. Sirius believed no one would suspect him, but the decision proved fatal. Peter betrayed them. He handed their secret straight to Voldemort. On October the 31st, 1981, Voldemort entered the Potters' home. James tried to hold him off, but was killed instantly. Lily, standing between Voldemort and her son, sacrificed herself to protect Harry, triggering the magic that would ultimately destroy Voldemort's body. When the dust settled, Sirius immediately hunted down Peter, desperate for revenge. On a crowded Muggle street, Peter turned the tables, framing Sirius for betrayal. He staged his own death by blowing up the street, killing a dozen Muggles and leaving only a severed finger behind. The Wizarding world believed Sirius guilty, branding him a murderer and traitor, while Peter slithered away in his animagus form, hiding for years as the pet rat Scabbers. Sirius was imprisoned in Azkaban without trial, and just like that, the Marauders were shattered. Tragic deaths of the Marauders. The betrayal of Pettigrew was the beginning of the end. James was already gone, and Sirius spent 12 years in Azkaban for crimes he didn't commit. Remus, left without his closest friends, lived a lonely life on the margins of society, discriminated against for being a werewolf. Peter, the weakest of them all, thrived in his cowardice, clinging to Voldemort's service and survival. When Sirius finally escaped Azkaban, he tried to make up for lost years, reconnecting with Harry and fighting once again against Voldemort's return. But his freedom was short-lived. In 1996, during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, he was struck down by his cousin Bellatrix Lestrange, falling through the veil in the Death Chamber. He was gone in an instant, leaving Harry without the godfather he had come to love like a father. Remus Lupin fought valiantly in the Second Wizarding War, becoming a teacher, a mentor, and eventually a husband and father to Nymphadora Tonks and their son Teddy. But war caught up with him too. In 1998, during the Battle of Hogwarts, Remus was killed in combat, leaving his son orphaned, just as Harry had once been. Peter Pettigrew's end was as bitter as his betrayal. In Malfoy Manor, years later, he hesitated when Voldemort ordered him to kill Harry. That moment of weakness, that sliver of loyalty buried deep inside him, sealed his fate. The silver hand Voldemort had gifted him turned against him, strangling him to death. By the time Voldemort was finally defeated, all 4 Marauders were gone. James, Sirius, Remus and Peter each met their end in the shadow of the war they had once fought together. Harry Potter's connection to the Marauders. Though the Marauders' story ended in tragedy, their legacy lived on strongly through Harry Potter. Even though Harry never truly knew his parents, he carried James's bravery, Lily's compassion, and the guidance of those who loved them. The Marauders, in their own ways, each became part of his journey. James was always there in the background, not just as the father Harry never knew, but as a mirror of the person Harry was becoming. From his Quidditch skills to his courage in standing against Voldemort, Harry embodied James's spirit. Through stories from Remus, Sirius and others, Harry learned not only about his parents' sacrifices, but also about the youthful joy and mischief they'd once had, reminding him that even in dark times, love and laughter mattered. Sirius gave Harry what he had always longed for, family. For 2 short years, Harry had someone who treated him not as the boy who lived, but simply as his godson, a boy worth loving. Remus, with his quiet wisdom, became another anchor in Harry's life. He taught Harry how to fight Dementors, gave him stories of James and Lily, and more importantly, showed him what it meant to live with hardship and still choose kindness. Even Peter, though despised for his betrayal, played a role in Harry's fate. Without Peter's moment of hesitation, Harry might never have survived Malfoy Manor, proving that even the weakest Marauder had one last part to play. And then there was the Marauders Map, a creation of 4 mischievous boys who never wanted to be forgotten. It became a vital tool for Harry, passed down like an heirloom from Sirius and Remus. Every time Harry whispered, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good," he carried a piece of their spirit with him.